With that manifestation of the COA, may I request that the committee be provided with a copy of the letter? And having said so, Madam Chair, may I request for a suspension of the briefing?
Briefing suspended. Briefing is hereby resumed. The Honorable Luistro.
Madam Chair, without going to the letters of the communication,
Could you please first manifest what you have in your possession?
with me is a copy of the letter of the Office of the Vice President, signed by Attorney Zuleka T. Lopez, Undersecretary and Chief of Staff, addressed to Honorable Gamaliel A. Cordoba, Chairperson, Commission on Audit, Quezon City. This is dated August 21, 2024. Madam Chair, this is composed of 4 pages, and I lament that I do not have material time to go over this letter by the letters. Nonetheless, I wish to manifest that the substance of this letter is an opposition to the subpoena that was issued by Congress. If I may read, we are of the position that the subject subpoena should not be complied for the following reasons. If I may continue, Madam Chair.
Yes, please proceed.
Among the issues that were raised, one is the violation of the principle of separation of power. Second is violation to due process. And third is the confidential nature of the fund. Madam Chair, I wish to manifest my comment to the issues that were raised in this letter. First, the principle of separation of power is not absolute. This is subject to exception. As a matter of fact, we call it the system of check and balances. And that is the very reason why the Congress has the oversight power, and that is to make sure that the laws enacted, including the appropriation laws, and to be specific, the GAA 2022, the source of the confidential fund, is properly implemented. If I may share, one of the landmark cases about oversight power is the Abacada Guro party list. There are 3 consequences of oversight power. One is congressional scrutiny. 2 is congressional investigation. And 3 is legislative supervision. With all due respect, by congressional scrutiny, without necessarily conducting an inquiry in aid of legislation, the Congress may request information and report from other branches of the government. Similarly, it can recommend and pass resolution for consideration of the agency involved. Madam Chair, with respect to the violation of due process, I humbly believe that we are all witnesses in today's hearing. We are in fact catering the right to due process. A number of the esteemed members of the House propounded questions already, but our Vice President maintained his position not to address the question concerning confidential fund. But speaking about due process, I humbly submit that notice was given. This is a budget briefing, and ample opportunity to explain was even accorded. It is my humble submission, Madam Chair, that contrary to the letter, we did not violate due process. As a matter of fact, we catered due process. Finally, Madam Chair, they raised the confidential nature of the fund. Ito po'y tanong na nais kong iwanan sa mga kapwa natin Pilipino. Granting that the nature of the fund is confidential and recognizing Memorandum Circular Number 15, 2023 relating to the privileged communication. Ang tanong po, Madam Chair, when there is notice of disallowance na nagsasabing ang 72 million out of 125 million na confidential fund ay hindi nagamit ng naaayon sa Joint Circular Number 15-01. And as a matter of fact, ipinababalik ng COA sa pamahalaan. Ang tanong, confidential fund pa po ba ang tawag dito? Privileged communication pa din po ba ang saklaw nito? Oo po, at tatahimik na lang po ba ang Kongreso? I wish to share the case of Chavez versus Public Estates Authority.
Kindly wrap up.
This is the right of the people to information on matters of public concern. There is no argument ang pera ng gobyerno ay pera ng taong bayan. Unless the citizens have proper information, we cannot fulfill the constitutional mandate that public office is a public trust. I submit, Madam Chair.
Madam Vice President, do you care to comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, nasabi kanina, ang gist lang na nakuha ko na nasabi kanina ni Representative
Luistro.
Yes, is that wala siyang time na isa-isahin per letter yung letter namin sa Commission on Audit on why the requested documents should not be released to Congress. Pero nakahanda na yung mga sagot niya sa lahat ng arguments namin sa national security, sa due process, and sa separation of powers. Is this part ba of what you said earlier, Representative Kimbo, let's stick to the plan? Yun yung narinig ko sa iyo kanina na hindi mo in-accommodate yung point of order na question. And to answer, the Office of the Vice President, on the issue of confidential funds, we have received audit actions regarding confidential funds of the OVP. We have submitted our responses and we assure our full cooperation with the ongoing and unfinished audit. We are cooperating and answering all the questions in the proper venue that is inside the Commission on Audit, not in the budget hearing for the 2025 proposal of the OVP budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Note all your comments. I do not recall saying the phrase "stick to the plan," Madam Vice President, and so yes, we do note your comments, and also I believe your compliment of the brilliance of the Honorable Luistro. So
Madam
next
Chair?
to yes,
Madam Chair, may I request that the Secretariat read your stick to the plan line?
As I said, Madam Vice President, pasensya na po, we don't have the right to make requests at this point in time. So we proceed to our next member, the Honorable Ramon Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon po sa ating lahat. And To begin, Madam Chair, actually may line of questioning po tayo, but a lot of it has been asked by our colleagues, and obviously the biggest issue for us here would be yung issues relating to confidential funds. But before that, I'd like to preface my questioning po kasi there were quite a number of point of orders regarding the scope of our budget hearing. And though, of course, we defer to the senior lawyers and their experience, it is my opinion that we are well within the bounds of our discussion for 3 points that I would like to share just for the consideration of the body. First, as mentioned by Congressman Manuel, under our rules, under Rule 162, we have rulings as President. Under Rule 163, we have supplementary rules regarding our parliamentary practices. So it's very clear po that by tradition, we really follow po, no, kung ano po yung nangyari sa previous hearings, we could still pursue the same. And very much, if I recall, in other proceedings, in other hearings for the budget, we do discuss years going back, and in fact, we can actually we can draw comparison with utilization and allocations of previous administrations, because precisely this is part of our oversight function and part in support of our duty in legislating for the General Appropriations Act. Second, Mr. Chair, I'd like to point out also that part of the President's budget in the NEP, if we take a look, that there is a portion on proposed budget, there's a portion on current budget, and there's a portion on actual. So as a matter of fact, and I believe it was actually DS Ungab who taught me this when we had our workshop, when we started for the first termers here. And that actually, while we are discussing the budget of 2025, verily part of the NEP, of the actual, is actually discussing 2022. And very much as precisely mentioned by Congresswoman Kimbo, sometimes the validity of appropriations can go on for 2 years, and that is why exactly we can really look into that. And third, and I think most important in relation to the issue of the confidential funds, is the question of yung sa COA po, yung itong notice of disallowance and audit report which we have received by virtue of subpoena duces tecum, 2024 po yung date nito. So I think it would have been impossible for us to tackle these matters in the previous deliberations, and I think rather than, although the proposal is noted that we have different committees to hear these kinds of things, given the nature that it is not yet final, I think the hearing before the budget would be most appropriate to consider the same. So with that said, Madam Chair, I would like to proceed with my questioning, and I would be addressing this question to the Honorable Vice President. Madam Chair, maybe ask through you, is the Honorable Vice President aware of the audit observation memorandums covering 3 different disbursements of confidential funds?
Madam Vice President.
On the issue of confidential funds, we have received audit actions regarding the confidential funds of the OVP. We have submitted our responses, and we assure the public of our full cooperation with the ongoing and unfinished audit.
Madam Chair, is the Honorable Vice President aware that for the first audit observation memorandum regarding the 2 disbursements of confidential fund, there were 2 issues raised by the COA?
Madam Vice President.
Madam Chair, on the issue of confidential funds, we have received audit actions from the COA regarding the confidential funds of the OVP. We have submitted our responses, and we assure the public our full cooperation with the ongoing and unfinished audit.
Thank you for the response, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, is the Honorable Vice President aware that one issue raised by the COA was the lack of documentary evidence presented?
Madam Vice President.
Madam Chair, on the issue of confidential funds, we have received audit actions from the COA regarding the confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President. We have submitted our responses, and we assure the public of our full cooperation with the ongoing audit.
Madam Chair, thank you for the response. Would the Honorable Vice President be aware that another issue raised by the Audit Observation Memorandum was the misappropriation categories? Because, Madam Chair, in the Audit Observation Memorandum, there was a distinguishment that the use of confidential funds shall be limited to certain categories of expenses, and that verily the point of the AOM was that there were findings that some of the categories included in the AOM were not subject or scope of confidential funds.
Madam Vice President.
On the issue of confidential funds, we have received audit actions from COA regarding confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President. We have submitted our responses, and we assure our full cooperation with the ongoing and unfinished audit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd move on to the next question. Regarding these AOMs, it seems to be that for COA, based on experience, masyadong matagal na po ito. May we ask, Madam Chair, if there is any delays of sorts on the part of the Office of the Vice President in terms of responding to these AOMs and notice of disallowance?
Madam Vice President.
Madam Chair, I think that question is best asked to the Commission on Audit. Why will you ask me that? Sinabi na nga niya, itatanong sa Commission on Audit eh.
Madam Chair, most respectfully, there was a response on the part of the Office of the Vice President, and I would just assume that the Vice President is aware of the timing of their response to any audit actions that she has repeatedly mentioned, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, that is a question for the Commission on Audit, not for the Office of the Vice President.
Madam Chair, well, I will rephrase and indulge the good Honorable Vice President. May I ask, Madam Chair, the COA, regarding the proceedings po nung kanilang audit observation memorandum. May we know, Madam Chair, through the member of COA, the date on which the AOM was submitted and the date of which the response was made?
Ask Muliano.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I don't have the documents, and I am not privy to the audit of the Intelligence and Confidential Fund because it is within the Intelligence and Confidential Fund Audit Unit.
Madam Chair, most respectfully, may we know the position of our member from COA here?
Madam Chair, I am an Assistant Commissioner of COA. I'm the senior, the head of the Assistant Commissioners Group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarifying. So, hindi po siya pala galing sa ICAUF po, no? So, I suppose we'll have to make do with that answer for now. A lot of my questions were supposed to bank on that. Madam Chair, I'll move on to the next po siguro. Based on the circular, the compliance of the liquidation of cash should be done within the within year end. And Madam Chair, it could be noted that the submission of the liquidation for the first confidential fund issued for 2022 was actually done in January 10, 2023. I will not address this to the Honorable Vice President, as she has pointed out. I will address this question to the COA. Madam Chair, is that correct, that part of the circular dictates that liquidation of cash advances regarding confidential funds should be done within year end?
Ask Muliano.
Yes, there is a requirement that all cash advances should be liquidated at year end.
Madam Chair, notwithstanding that the scope of covered period would be, for example, in the case of 2022, it was December 21 to December 31. Would that still require that liquidation be done at year end?
Ask Muliano.
If the disbursement is not yet generally all unliquidated cash advances should be liquidated at year end.
So, Madam Chair, notwithstanding that it ended December 31, it should have been liquidated at that time, but yet the liquidation report was filed in January 10. Wouldn't this be ground for the disallowance of the whole confidential fund for 2022, Madam Chair?
Ask Muliano.
Under our rules, the disallowance is based on the usage of funds, not on the cash advance. If the usage of funds is irregular, it could be disallowed, but it is based on untimely liquidation of cash advance. There are administrative penalties under the circular, but it should not be the sole basis for notice of disallowance.
Madam Chair, if with the indulgence of the committee, just two more questions.
Yes.
The one more question on that matter, the address to the good Assistant Commissioner. Madam Chair, what is the scope of these administrative penalties? Ano pa yung length ng time of penalties that were prescribed?
I don't have the circular on cash advance. It's 97-001 if I still remember it.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, last question po, no? And I think it should be noted that the first CIF that was issued, the first confidential funds 2022, was based on yung contingent fund and later on passed on. But however, for the second, it was already part of the GAA, and this amount was 500 million. However, based on the liquidation, only 375 million was used. May we know, Madam Chair, from the Office of the Vice President, why the fourth supposed quarter, the fourth tranche, was not utilized?
Madam Vice President?
Kasi Madam Chair, noong nagsagutan na kayo, ikaw, Representative Kimbo, tsaka Representative Castro, about the 11 days, 19 days, ilang days na yon ng utilization, nakita ko na that was the start of an attack against the Office of the Vice President, and i-hinge yung attack on the confidential fund use. So nakita na namin yung timelines and nakita na namin yung kumbaga script sa narrative ng attack on the Office of the Vice President with regard to confidential funds. So to show goodwill to the people and para mapabigyan ng muka na sinabi namin na hindi namin napapadali ang trabaho namin dahil sa confidential funds, dahil natatarget namin kung saan dapat ilagay ang proyekto, pero pwede kaming magtrabaho ng walang confidential funds. That is the reason why hindi na namin ginamit ang fourth quarter na confidential funds sa Office of the Vice President to show the people, the public, that we are in good faith sa paggamit ng confidential funds. And we are true to our word na sinabi namin, napapadali ang trabaho, pero pwedeng i-give up yan.
That was your last question.
With the
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair.
Let us just finish, Honorable Gutierrez.
Given the substantial response this time, Madam Chair, I'd like to follow up the question. But isn't it the case for this batch of confidential funds? This was issued through the GAA, and therefore it went very precisely, my NEP po yan as part of the President's budget. You made your case before the DBM for 500 million. So the expectation is there was a program to be followed for disbursement for 500 million. Isn't it, Madam Chair, when we indicate in our GAA certain allocations, the expectation is that it would be utilized to its fullest extent? Would this mean now, Madam Chair, that the confidential fund, even for any supposed program submitted to the DBM, is actually discretionary on the part of the public official? Madam Chair.
Madam Vice President.
Madam Chair.
Let's just finish, Madam Vice President.
Yes, Madam Chair. Yung paggamit namin, kanina in-explain ko na, hindi na namin ginamit. Kasi nakita na namin sa timeline may sagutan ng 11, 19 days, and then meron nang lumabas na AOM ng COA within days, and then meron na namang lumabas na another AOM. So nakikita na namin yung pattern noong attack. That's why we decided in the Office of the Vice President na wag na dagdagan pa yung bala ng attack at ipakita sa mga tao na yung confidential funds, we are in good faith of using that and goodwill namin na napapadali yung trabaho, pero pwede siyang hindi gamitin ng Office of the Vice President.